So here's the predicament that I'm in right now. I enjoy a hobby called bike packing. With bike packing, I put a bunch of bags onto my bike and I load that up with a tent, sleeping bag, food, water, and a handful of other things. And then I head out into essentially the middle of nowhere with a limited amount of support, except for what I take with me. And you have to be extremely self-sufficient. You can't really, wow, I got a lot of fingerprints on that, but you can't really rely upon a cell phone most of the time because, you know, some of the places that you're in just don't have the greatest cell coverage. And whenever you run into anyone who goes out and does any sort of like, you know, backwoods type stuff, so an example would be the people who, okay, let's be honest, it's always Jeep people that like go out and do off-road things. They're recommended that they take along a CB or FRS or GMRS radios, or if they have their ham radio license, a ham radio, since they're limited in the amount of cell coverage that they have in those areas. And we fall into the same thing when we do bike packing. We have a limited amount of cell coverage in many of these areas. And on top of that, it's easy to charge my cell phone. It's easy to charge my bike computer. It's easy to charge all sorts of other gadgets with me, because what I do is I take along a Bioenno USB solar panel, and I use that to charge this gigantic Chonkster battery bank using USB. So it tops that off during the day because it sits on the back of my bike on the top of the bag that sits on the top of the rear rack, and it charges this battery. And then at night I draw off of that battery to charge my cell phone. I use it to charge my bike computer. I use it to charge all of these things because I use my bike computer for navigation, and those maps I can import and export from my phone. But what do you do about amateur radio? Because here's the biggest issue. You know what radio I really wanted to be able to do that with was the FT5. But the problem is that the FT5 uses that 12 volt barrel connector. And I know that I could get some step up converters and all sorts of other things in order to turn that from a standard, USB voltage output, whatever that is, up to 12 volts in order to go in and charge these radios. But then that means I have to carry extra stuff on me whenever I go out. And so then the solution kind of came along of the ID-52. And here's kind of the issue that I have with this radio is, if you have $650 and you need a radio that charges USB, this is your radio. If you have $650 and you want to buy a radio, Kenwood D74. I know this is discontinued. All right, that person that you're in the comments getting ready to type, relax. I know it's discontinued, but there's enough new old stock and things like that that you can find one that's out there. And even then, I think I would probably recommend the D72 if you can find one of those, because I think the D72 is a better radio. And here's the issues that I have, because right now you guys care about my comments toward the ID-52, but the ID-52 does not live in a bubble, right? It lives in the same realm as the Kenwood D74 and the Yaesu FT5 or FT3, because they're pretty much the same radio. I know, guy in the comments, you're sitting there saying that they're not the same radio. Let's be honest, they're pretty much the same radio. I paid for an orange button. So why am I saying this about the ID-52? The ID-52 and all these radios that I have sitting in front of me right here are flagship radios. And then I have an Anytone 878 in the ham shack behind me. And I would consider that to be a flagship Chinese radio, which take that as you want, right? That's because, let's be honest, Chinese radios, no one buys them because they're good. They buy them because they're inexpensive. For me, let's start with the positives of the ID-52. The audio on this is amazing. All right. D-Star actually sounds good. D-Star on the Kenwood, granted, the Kenwood speaker, I think, sounds phenomenal among HTs. I think the ICOM does that really well, but even on the Kenwood, D-Star just sounds really muddy, sounds overly compressed. It's not as bad as DMR, but it still just doesn't sound all that great. I think that Yaesu is the best sounding out of all of them. But you know, there is some compromise with that, but I do feel like Yaesu is out of all of the digital modes, the digital voice modes that exist, I think that Yaesu's is the best, and I rarely give Yaesu props, but I do think that Yaesu System Fusion sounds the best. But D-Star on the ID-52 sounds good. FM repeaters sound really good on the ID-52. And I think a lot of that is because, like, normally whenever people put speakers on the inside of these, I think the only company that cares about their speaker quality is Kenwood, and that's just because they're an audio company, right? Like me growing up, I did not grow up as Kenwood as a radio manufacturer. I grew up with them as an audio manufacturer. They made car stereos, and because of that, they sound really good. But the ID-52 sounds great. I'm reading off my notes here. The screen on this is plastic, but it doesn't feel as soft as the ID-52. When I took this up to Michigan, well, I took the FT3 up to Michigan, and I wore it clipped on my Camelback, I was really worried about something impacting this screen, and then that's it. My radio is just done for, and I have to send it in and get a new one. Because this isn't a touch screen, it's kind of different, but at the same time, if it does get scratches on it, I know you can use some plastic polishes and, like, you know, buff that right out. The display on it is great. It's easy to see when you are, it's easy to see. Oh, there's people talking on it. Let's turn that down. But you could see, like, guys can even see this with a bright light glaring right onto it. I mean, when the glare hits it, it's not like super readable, but nothing really is. But notice right there, it muted down, and I have a gigantic bright light in my face, and then another one right there, and the window's open next to me. And you could see that, like, it's still visible. I mean, you're not going to be like up in your face, but right now it's very I'm gonna use this later, so I'm gonna just power it off for now, so we're not, you know, listening in on them. The screen is great. Even like I had it outside. It's winter time in Indiana. There's snow. Well, there was snow on the ground. There's not right now. I had sunglasses on in order to prevent snow blindness, and I could still see the display. It's really good. The buttons have really good feedback when pressed. They feel really good. Even the push to talk has a very satisfying click to it. You know when it's pressed down, with the exception of one button, which we'll go through later. Reception on it's really good. My first ever contact that I made with it was 2-meter simplex. In this area, there's a lot of very pretentious people that are on the radio, and so one of the issues that you run into is, like, if you put your call sign out there, you're not guaranteed to get a response at all. I know that there's people listening, but they just don't respond back completely. I heard a guy calling CQ on simplex. He was mobile. I'm on the second floor of a 3-story house. Usually I have to use the FT991 in the other room and use the antenna that's up on the roof in order to do simplex conversations. I was able to do it with this. Granted, it does have a Diamond SRH77CA antenna, which I put on, as you saw, I put on every single one of my radios that I can. So it's pretty good. The battery life on this is great. I love the battery life. It's pretty solid. You can get the big chunkster battery that goes with it, the 3,000 plus milliamp hour battery that you can get for the, like, basically the ID-705, like the big battery for the ID-705. It's awesome. I love it. It has USB charging. I know it's another complaint that I'm going to have later on. It is micro, so it doesn't take advantage of USB Type-C fast charging, but it's still really good. You know, it's, I don't know, I like it. Like, I really like those features. Now time for the downside and why I'm saying you should probably buy the Kenwood. It does not do 220. I know that in this area there's only one 220 repeater, and I know that in many areas there are no 220 repeaters, but this is a flagship radio, right? Flagship radios mean that you would expect to have that. It's like buying a Lamborghini and then it doesn't come with a radio. Lamborghinis come with a radio, by the way. But imagine buying one. Imagine spending $200,000 for a car and it doesn't come with a radio. I spent $650 for this radio and it doesn't come with 220. It doesn't come with APRS. And every time the one guy from ICOM US, every time they interview him and they're like, does it do APRS? They're not asking you, does it do APRS? They're basically saying, you guys need to add APRS to this. Because his response is always, it does DPRS. Okay, but DPRS kind of sucks. Let's be honest. Like, okay, it's not bad. It's not as bad as APRS because it's a guaranteed connection, but I do like the periodic beaconing that APRS does. I like the text messaging abilities and everything that APRS can do, even though like the reliability of APRS is pretty low. It uses USB or micro USB and not USB Type-C. That's maybe just me. I mean, Yaesu is sitting over here still on their data port. They're still rocking USB Mini. So let's be honest, like Yaesu, congratulations, you've hit like 2010 smartphone status. ICOM, you've hit like 2014 smartphone status. Last time I checked on my G-Shock here, it's 2022. And we should have USB Type-C, right? That should be a regular thing. It does not do full duplex. None of these radios do full duplex except for my Alinco. Look, I have a problem. I have a lot of radios. I know. Don't judge me. All right. Don't judge me. I know you're judging me anyway, but whatever. My Alinco does full duplex. None of these do. The D-72 does full duplex. That's why it's typically the radio that satellite operators go to. Okay. Now we need to power it on for this next one because I want you just to hear this. And when I say that, no one's on in order to demo this. Let's see if there's anyone on any repeaters that I can. Okay. So there's someone on that one. Let me go to the second VFO and tune into that one. Now, notice how it just cut out right there, and then it came back, and then it cut out, and it came back, and then it cuts out again here in a second. Right there, it cut out again, and then it's back. It's something weird that this radio does where if you have the B band will mute itself like that, and it drives me absolute batshit crazy. I'm sitting there listening to it, and then, but then it'll, and you miss, and it's just kind of weird. And I don't like it. And it feels like that's something that should be fixed with a software update. This is the thing, is it could be that I'm stupid and that I haven't found the menu setting to fix that. I've tried turning off B-band mute. I've tried turning off everything I could. I tried restoring it to factory defaults. I played in the menus and stuff, and I couldn't figure it out. So if you know what it is, go down to the comments and hit that like button while you're down there, and then, you know, subscribe and stuff. Everything in this revolves around this quick menu button. All right. You have to figure out how to use that, or this radio sucks. That is where you're going to live at. You're not going to live in the regular menu. You're going to live on that one. That's how this radio kind of functions. And because I've never used an icon before, I don't mind the user interface. I know there's some people out there that hate it. I don't have an issue with it. But it is one of those things that just be aware that like you're going to be living out of that quick menu for a while. The power button is recessed and it'll click, but it's not actually like depressing the power button in. It'll click, and it's not like, you can see I'm holding it and it's not turning on, but I felt the click. You have to go in all the way to get it to click. And it's just this really weird thing. The VFO knob feels really good. The volume knob feels like garbage. Which is kind of weird, right? It's, again, this seems like nitpicky stuff, right? I do want to remind you that this radio is $650. Imagine that you buy a Ferrari, you buy a Lamborghini, because that's what this is. This is the Ferrari or the Lamborghini or the Rolls Royce. Imagine that you get in there and when you open it, the door squeaks, right? That's not something that you should have out of a flagship radio or out of a flagship product. And that's what just like, it just kind of irks me. And so I put down on here, I was like, if you have $650, I'm reading off this like Reddit update I did over people that were just like, hey, how you enjoying your new HT? It doesn't, for me, APRS, and for a lot of people, APRS is a big deal breaker. The DTMF not being on there is not an issue for me, because like the same people that are complaining that it doesn't do DTMF are the people who say that IRLP is not a real mode, that it shouldn't exist because you're not making a real, you're not making a real contact, right? So I just ignore that. If I want to use DTMF, I have my Kenwood, the FT991, the DTMF keypad on it sucks. So I typically either use the FT3 or the D74 if I'm going to use IRLP, which I rarely ever do. It doesn't have 220, and it doesn't, like, again, I'm saying APRS again, because those things should be present on a flagship radio. The Kenwood does all of that, but it's missing full duplex and it's missing USB charging, which means that when I go out on my bike packing journey, I have to take the ICOM with me. And herein lies the issue. I don't want to take the ICOM with me. I don't, because I want to have APRS. And I know I could go in there and manually pull up where I'm at and all of that, but I would just like to be able to beacon it out. It's just, I don't know. It's just one of those things, like, you have to make that decision yourself, especially $650. So here's my suggestion for you. If you have $650, I would buy an FT70 because it has fusion in it. I would buy a hot spot, not a rugged spot, because like they even advertise that they come with knockoff diamond antennas, which they also call themselves the Rolls Royce of hot spots. And so Rolls Royce doesn't come with fake stuff. So buy, like, you know, a DV Mega or a Zoom spot. Both are really good, or an open spot. And then use the leftover money to buy a Casio G-Shock DW5000 because it has the screw down case back, which is a little bit more durable than the 5600, which has where you have to actually have 4 screws go into the case back. That's my suggestion right there. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that video.